Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Captains of Industry with myself, Fifi Peters. Today's captain has more than 26 years of experience in the ICT sectors across Europe, Africa and the Middle East. His expertise has propelled him to key leadership roles at multinational corporations such as Oracle, Hewlett Packard Enterprises and more recently London-listed business software group Sage, where he leads its African and Middle East operations. Allow me to introduce Pieter Bensch, who is the Executive Vice President for Africa and the Middle East at Sage. Pieter, thanks so much for joining us on the show. Now, before we get to your experience and what you have seen in the rapidly changing global ICT market so far, and of course where you see it going, we want a bit of insights into what actually got you into the industry as a young man.
That's an interesting question, and thank you for having me. So, yeah, it was, when I was at school, I was very unsure what to do. I did know that I liked technology, and at that stage, technology was not far advanced as it is today. So at the end I decided to study as a computer science teacher. I like making a difference, so it was combining the best of both worlds. Becoming a teacher and having the computer science background I thought would fulfill my requirement. And halfway through that it wasn't exactly what I thought it would be. So I enrolled as a second course at UNISA as part of my studies. So I did two courses at the same time.
Wow, that must have taken an incredible amount of hard work and discipline.
Well, I was passionate about technology, and as time passed, I realized how passionate I was about it, and also making a difference. But when I stepped into a classroom to be a teacher, I realized that that was not exactly my calling, and I had more passion for technology and making a difference than being there. So that's when I joined. At that point was called Transnet IT division, and it's history from there.
For sure.
My career started in ICT at that point.
I mean, it's 26 years or more then, I'm sure, and you have worked for quite a number of players in the ICT sector. You've seen quite a lot of change. But let's talk about your most recent position right now as the Executive Vice President at Sage. What made you say yes?
The opportunity to make change. The opportunity to create change in the industry and on our continent. I mean, when I was at Oracle, I had a responsibility across the continent, and I've always been passionate about Africa and the potential it holds. So, yeah, I think the opportunity at Sage is enormous, and I think also what's different is Sage's breadth of coverage is from small business to large business, whereas before that my experience was only in large businesses. And making a difference in a large business takes time, whereas you can make a difference in a small business quite quickly if you have the right technology. And with a passion, I think you can do that.
Quickly, but I'm sure without its challenges. I mean, the small business sector, I imagine, is an exciting one, given that it's quite key to the growth of Africa. But more difficult to navigate, would you not say?
Definitely more difficult to navigate. Sage's focus is around two sectors, in accounting and payroll. So accounting is at the core of every business, and making a difference and having the right automation, having the right software for a small business enables them to be agile and to grow faster. Businesses without technology, smaller businesses without technology, are constrained a bit because they do need to take care of all these things that's non-core. And what we want to do is make sure we take care of that for them and automate their business so that they can thrive.
Now, one of the tasks I believe that you were given when you were appointed about 2 years ago was to realize on Sage's global vision, 2020 vision of making it admin-free for small businesses and for entrepreneurs who are currently on the ground. How's that going?
That is going significantly well. I think we currently have just over 200,000 customers on our books in this region, which is significant compared to a big Oracle, because they focus on enterprises, and there aren't so many of them around. But being able to play in the small space and enable those businesses, we have added a significant number of new logos in the last 12 months and continue to do so, especially in the small and medium space, automating their businesses and taking care of manual and non-core items for those businesses.
I mean, in terms of automation, particularly for the small business sector, the conversation right now for everyone is about getting future ready, especially in light of the fourth industrial revolution. But what you find in Africa is that a lot of the small businesses that also operate are in the informal market. And for me, I'm wondering, has that in any way impacted on your other KPI to realize more growth and increased market share for Sage, given that the informal market is so excluded from the formal system? Or are there innovative ways that Sage is looking to bring the external market in the formal system?
I guess that's a constraint in the industry. Outside of South Africa, the informal market does not have the capability to invest in technology. Unfortunately, to invest in automation and to take care of that, you need that jump into being able to invest in technology, even if it's a laptop or something to help you. And the informal business outside of South Africa does not have that capability. I think as an industry, as an ICT industry, that's where we need to invest more, is invest in the informal sector. Those are the businesses that can grow, has the opportunity, but outside of what we do, so we do a lot of that inside of South Africa. Outside South Africa is where we need to do more investment in the informal industry. I would say that's where government can help us. How do we invest in the informal industry to bring them into the formal small industry business?
We'll talk about the practical steps, perhaps about how governments and the rest of the continent can assist players like yourselves. But let's keep it at home for now, where I believe 90% of Sage's revenues are derived in terms of the Africa and the Middle East operations. We have, for the better part of the last decade, had a very constrained and difficult economic climate. How has that impacted on your business and your growth targets?
It didn't have a significant impact for us in South Africa. In fact, we continue to grow very, very well in South Africa. In the rest of Africa, we see the slowdown in growth, and in the Middle East for that matter. So
sounds like an anomaly to me, because South Africa is the one country that is not growing, especially to the pace of the other, is it 6 or 7 fastest growing countries in the world that happen to be on the continent?
We have significantly outpaced the local growth in the small and the medium sector. It is all around enabling these small businesses to automate their business and being able to make a small investment, which, if you look at the investment you have to make to do that, is small. If you take the payoff in 2 or 3 years, enables you to find an app on your phone, if you're a plumber, to track your plumber where he's going, or to see what parts he's using. The cost you save in being more agile and being more perfect in what you're doing is played off in a small investment you have to make in technology.
So does that mean that as you continue your tenure here, leading the Africa operations here at Sage, there aren't any immediate plans to diversify some revenues out of South Africa?
We do have a focus in revenues outside of South Africa. So we have a presence in East Africa, in Nairobi. We have a presence in West Africa, in Nigeria, and a presence in the Middle East, in Dubai. So we continue to run those businesses. The economies there we find slower. We find also slower investment in a small business. So in South Africa, the investment from small business is significant in technology. And that's the anomaly we find in Africa, that the investment there is in medium and large business and not so much from small business.
That is incredible, and especially as, I mean, a lot of businesses would say that given that things are so tough, I mean, and costs are so constrained, investing for the future is important, but it's not high up on the agenda right now.
We find the adverse of that. We find that a small business in South Africa do invest in technology to further their business, but as I said, outside of South Africa is not the same trend.
Pieter, I mean, in terms of just one last question on South Africa, your dominant market here, before we get into your operations elsewhere, as we do read headlines regarding the level of low business confidence, you say so far it hasn't impacted you. But if business confidence surely was a lot higher, I suppose the economy would be growing better, and more small businesses that you and medium businesses that you service would certainly be doing more for the bottom line. What would you say would be the quick wins to really get the engines of South Africa's economy going again and confidence improve?
Investing in infrastructure. The government has talked about investing in infrastructure for a long time. We've seen the plans, but we haven't seen that hit the ground yet. investing in infrastructure will really get the economy going. And that will do a lot for small businesses and medium businesses, not just large businesses. Although large-scale projects like building railways or road infrastructure would make a difference, small businesses will benefit from that significantly. They all contribute in that in some way or form. So that's for me the key. We need to invest in infrastructure.
And as a private player, I suppose there's only a limit or a small, the word I'm looking for is there's only so much that you yourselves can do in terms of investing in your own infrastructure, as we have seen the case from the telecoms sector.
So we invest in our own infrastructure, and I guess if you look at the big players, they have invested in infrastructure from a cloud perspective in South Africa. That will enhance the economy and does contribute to the economy somewhat. But the infrastructure in road and the basic infrastructure for travel and communication, that's still lack, I think, and that's where we can ask government to assist us in investing in that.
And final words of advice for some of the governments outside of your South African market. And before I even touch on the Middle East, perhaps you can just constrain it to your East African operations and what you are doing in West Africa. I mean, would you say that infrastructure would also be critical there as well in terms of improving operations for SAGE, or infrastructure and other things?
Absolutely. I would agree that totally governments outside of South Africa, African governments in general, we've seen more investments over the last 5 years than before, and if that continues or accelerates, we would definitely see the continent perspiring, or the wrong word, but growing faster, right? So that investment is required across the continent. There's always optimism around what Africa could do and can do, but that infrastructure, in my opinion, is what's slowing down the growth in Africa.
All right, Pieter, let us park the conversation for there as we do take a short break with our captain who is joining us in studio. We have been unpacking what SAGE has been doing so far in South Africa and on the rest of the continent. When we return from the short break, we'll get insights as to how they are seeing the ICT landscape change, especially with regards to the fourth industrial revolution, in which many say that Africa is still stuck in the second. Stay with us. Welcome back. Still with me today is our captain for this week, and that is Pieter Bensch, who is the Executive Vice President for Africa and the Middle East at SAGE. Pieter, before we went to a break, I mean, you recited your 26 years of being in the ICT landscape, and you have seen rapid changes. Just that note on the fourth industrial revolution and how SAGE is seeing it, particularly with regards to the African context. Is it a pipe dream to say that Africa is ready or will be ready, or do we still have other things to fix before we can climb on board here?
I think Africa is ready for fourth industrial revolution. And a lot of talk around fourth industrial revolution, people think of big companies, you know, what would a big retailer do with fourth industrial revolution? Whereas it will have a bigger impact in the small business, because that's where we will see the uptake in innovation and automation from a fourth industrial revolution point of view. I do think Africa is ready for fourth industrial revolution, and I think we will see a leapfrog from technology point of view, skipping a few generations in technology advancement into jumping right into more wireless capabilities and use that as a springboard into the fourth industrial revolution, helping small businesses getting off the ground quicker.
And describe to us like some of the changes that you have seen so far, particularly by way of, you know, cloud-based accounting services that are offered there at SAGE, and also the payrolls system. How has that been disrupted by technology, and what room for further disruption are you envisioning, hopefully, as SAGE taking the charge?
We've touched on that earlier. The growth we've seen in SAGE in this region has been cloud-based growth. So we don't see growth in our desktop traditional products. We see growth in cloud-based. And cloud is the requirement to jump into the fourth industrial revolution, to do automation. It will accelerate it. So our growth is definitely in native cloud products from an accounting and a payroll point of view. And we continue to invest heavily in that because that's where we see the growth from a continent and globally in cloud native products.
But of course, the fourth industrial revolution would need power certainty and security of supply. And that is something that the continent is challenged with, never mind what is happening in South Africa. To what degree is this an impediment to realizing innovative growth?
We spoke about it earlier. It is a complete showstopper. Having the power and infrastructure around that needs significant investment. We cannot continue with rolling power outages. It does put a handbrake on how businesses can grow, especially on small businesses. During power outages, we do see slowdown in how people buy software because they invest in other ways. They invest in generators, and that's required to keep your business going. So every time there's a focus on rolling blackouts, we see a slowdown and a defocus in people investing in technology in their business.
Skills. I have read that you have highlighted the area of skills on the continent as also being an area of concern and an area in which we can do a lot more to improve. What role is SAGE also, as it does grapple with insufficient skills from some of the workers here on the continent, what role are you playing to ensure that we do have enough skill supply in the future?
It's one of my passions. Skills, for me, is at the core of growing an economy. And if we are going to focus on growing the ICT sector, if we're looking at the fourth industrial revolution, we are short of skills. We as SAGE continue to invest in skills. We just recently invested in another graduate program, getting a big group of graduates through our process. We work with our business partners to help them invest in the graduate program. We work across the continent to invest in graduate programs. And look at schools. We started a Lego League to start getting school kids interested in programming because that's where it starts. And in my opinion, the skills for ICT starts at a school level. We do not see that uptake yet. We are doing a lot from our own point of view, and I know other players in the industry are doing a lot. We're not doing enough yet to invest in skills from a young level to move into the ICT sector. That is the future. We know that it's the future. We can't deny that. We see the growth. Our growth in ICT is outpacing the economy, which shows you that that's where the growth is. So as a nation and as a continent, we need to invest more in ICT skills from a school level. It is too late to start from a university level or post-school level.
And I mean, as a man who studied computer science himself, I imagine that you have quite a few, maybe one or two ideas with regards to what that a syllabus should be looking like to ensure that the kids that do come out of our schools, of our university, actually have the required skills to meet the demands of the fourth industrial revolution.
I have my own opinions about where our syllabus is. My own son is still doing computer science in grade 10. And that syllabus is a bit ancient, if I have to be honest. It can be more interesting, it can be more automation, it can be more robotics, and that will entice more kids to move into that area. We need to move away from theory and the traditional programming, because once these kids grow up and move into the real world, programming will not be at the core of what we do. Innovation into automation, AI would be at the core of what we do. And having thoughts of, or kids be experimenting into that is what we need them to do.
And Pieter, just one last question on the fourth industrial revolution. I mean, as a man who has worked across many jurisdictions, how do we currently stack up when it comes to some of the innovations that you are seeing being rolled out in Europe and the Americas and the Middle East? How does Africa stack up?
I will speak for South Africa first. I think South Africans are by nature innovative. We have to overcome problems, and for years we've had to overcome our own problems, which made us more innovative. So we have innovation built into our culture. There are many innovations in the fourth industrial revolution and in ICT coming out of South Africa that we are using globally, that's being deployed globally. I'm not aware of any in Africa, but I'm sure there is some in Africa as well. So yes, we are playing a role globally in advancing the fourth industrial revolution. And we have some very clever people in this country that are really innovative and making a contribution globally that maybe should step up and be more visible, but they are really doing a lot under the covers and making a significant investment in fourth industrial revolution globally.
And let's just talk about doing business in or on the continent. Many business leaders, thought leaders, I'm sure you would agree, have Africa as literally the last untapped growth frontier in the world. But there's a lot in terms of providing an enabling environment that many say can be improved upon. I'd like your thoughts on doing business in Africa as Sage. I mean, a company that has been here for quite some time and has stayed here when many have left because it has become too tough.
I agree that Africa is the last frontier for growth. It's been on the cards for talk over more than 20 years. Companies have invested in Africa, but we have to be patient when we invest in Africa. We will invest more in Africa as infrastructure builds up into Africa. But from an IT perspective, we see the opportunity for growth. We see in every country in Africa there is an opportunity to improve technology and how we use technology. But we have to be patient when we invest in Africa. I think 20 years ago there was a big talk about invest in Africa, you're going to see the return, but you're not going to see the return in the next 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. You will see growth, but it's having your footprint, having your foundation in the country ready for when that growth accelerates. But there's definitely growth in Africa, in every country. We just have to be patient and invest more in what we do there.
What would you say patience looks like when translated into years? Is it 5 years? Is it more 5 to 10 years?
5 to 10 years. That would be my opinion on what patience looks like.
Now, the company Sage has also operations in the Middle East. Quite a number of companies we have seen, multinationals, have set up shop in Dubai for a whole host of reasons. What were yours?
So we still have a young operation in Dubai. Unlike some of the other ICT companies that's been there for a long time, our investment is not that old. We do see a big growth in the Middle East, especially now that they've started to introduce VAT in the Middle East. So in the past, the need for accounting software was not there until VAT arrived. Mm-hmm. Now suddenly you need some accounting software to manage your VAT returns. So that is, I think our entry was timeless, and we see capitalizing on that. Payroll software was also not a big thing in the Middle East, but mm-hmm. recently having to manage big payrolls and more complexity around tax, we see an uptake on payroll software, both from a small and a medium sector point of view.
I mean, in terms of doing business in Dubai, the attraction by many is, I think they've got quite a number of favorable tax breaks amongst other things. But how would you compare doing business in regions like the Middle East, like Dubai, to doing business here in South Africa?
I wouldn't say it's very different. Doing business in Dubai is similar to doing business in South Africa. I think the economy and the ecosystem might be different, but the use of technology at the end of the day is what we do. We have technology to enable businesses to work smarter and to thrive. And that's what we do, and it lands in the Middle East, and we are able to assist small and medium businesses to grow and to think and work differently.
And Pieter, as we wrap up this conversation, just indulge us or give us insights into some of the growth or the targets that Sage is targeting in the medium term. Let's start off in the Middle East and then we'll bring it back down home.
So unfortunately, we're still in a quiet period from a Sage point of view, but we are excited about the growth in this continent. I am passionate and excited about the growth in this continent. As I said, in some of the countries we have to be patient. It will come. But in South Africa and the Middle East, we see significant growth in the small and medium sector from a financial software point of view and from a payroll point of view.
And as we do, as the world actually grapple against the real prospects of a slowing global economy, a US recession, the prospects of trade wars between the two largest powerhouses, what do you see as the major hurdles or the headwinds to realizing your targets on the continent in the medium term?
On the African continent?
That's correct.
I would go back to the infrastructure investment. It's not only an obstacle, it's a hurdle.
Policy certainty, I mean, it's also something that gets mentioned quite a bit. Are you okay as SAGE on the policy front?
I'm not familiar with any of the details around policies. I mean, we mostly focus on where the infrastructure investment go. I do get involved in some of the conversations that there are some policy changes that could help cross-border transactions, relaxing on some import duties, taxations across the continent. All of those things are ongoing discussions. I think those are things that's easier to overcome than getting governments to start investing in infrastructure.
All right, infrastructure, that is the key hurdle, addressing that deficit, running into the trillions of dollars. I do believe for companies like SAGE to really get up and going. Of course, the small to medium business sector being key to the growth of the continent, and you get the infrastructure plug filled in, maybe you get more stronger small businesses. But that is where we leave it for this week's episode of Captains of Industry. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.